of episode 5 of Learning and Unlearning, where we're discussing mental health issues and the way that men deal with their mental health, some of the experiences that led us to first acknowledge that we have mental health issues, and how that has affected our lives. So what we're going to do in this second part is we're going to discuss the ways in which our mental health has affected how we deal with other people. So our relationships with, whether it's romantic partners, friends, and family, and the things that we cherish. And when I say the things that we cherish, I'm talking about your career. I'm talking about your ventures that you've tried out, hobbies that you've done, anything that you're really passionate about where mental health nearly derailed you from that, or where jeopardized your ability to excel in a particular thing that you're doing in life. So I think we'll start with you, Dumi. If you can just let us know in what ways did your mental health affect, your relationships, and secondly, the things that you cherish most in your life.
Yeah, I think my doctor, my GP, my family's GP once said an interesting thing to me. We were talking about, he was just checking up on my headspace and how I was doing, because I'd recently seen him like two weeks prior, because I was struggling with some things, and he said something about how a lot of the time when depression is chronic or not like situational, sometimes it doesn't require the presence of external factors making your life particularly difficult in that moment, and he said that for him it just means he said I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's a chronic inability to be grateful for the wonderful things in his life. Wow. And I was, right? Which is, by the way, sidebar, one of the reasons why like therapy is so important, because even when you don't have the language to express what you're going through yourself, somebody else might have the language to give life to your experience or help you understand your experiences better. But yeah, he said it's a chronic inability to be grateful for the wonderful things in his life. And I don't think I've ever had anything anyone ever said resonate within me that strongly. So yeah, it was, yeah, that's probably been how, in a sentence, if we were to characterize the impact that my mental health struggles have had on my life in a sentence, it would be that, right? That it's given me, or it's resulted in a chronic inability to be grateful for the awesome things in my life. And I think over the years, partly my experiences, but also my response to them has sort of created a very has given me a really pessimistic outlook on life, right? I think I've begun to, when I say I have and not had, is because I think I still think in this frame of mind, but I think I've begun to think of life as an inherently negative experience, right? One where if you take all the good things and you subtract all the bad things from them, it's the bad things seem to outweigh the good, right? The sum total of life experience seems to be a negative experience, it often feels like the good things just don't make up for the bad things, and I think, when that's your outlook on everything, then it's always going to have dire consequences on how you navigate your relationships, your professional life, your career, and it's going to dampen and sour your outlooks, your outlook and the ways in which you perceive everything. And I think the thing that took the biggest knock was probably my relationship with my mother first, but secondly, my relationship with my partner. I think I'll start with the relationship I had with my mother. There was a period where I could tell my mother was really, really concerned about me. It was probably a year or two ago. And we speak about it candidly now, but she speaks about how I would get into the house, greet everyone, and go straight to my room. I spent all of my time in my room. I spent all of my time on my own, just because I I couldn't I couldn't deal with being questioned about what's going on,
Yeah.
because I didn't know how I was going to react to that. But I'm also the most transparent person that I know, right? You see my feelings on my face, and I've never been able to hide that, or to to veil what I'm feeling, you know. So that just meant I isolated myself from my mother, you know, which, like, as it would have on any relationship, had obviously an array of negative impacts on our relationship. I think to a degree, my mother's always been one of my best friends, but I think it really dented my ability to relate to my mother in an ongoing manner.
Yeah.
The second one, and probably the one where probably where the most significant and noticeable difference happened, or where my mental health became the biggest impediment, was in my relationship with my partner. And like I said, it's like, or like Tammy said earlier, about how when you're not in a good headspace, men do this thing of imposing the burden of doing the work on the women around us, because we expect the women around us to nurse us, right, and to be
Mm.
our caregivers, and to nurture us whenever we need nurturing. And largely because you know we exist in a patriarchal culture where it's unheard of to go and seek that same nurturing from men, right? Especially if you think you don't have the means to seek therapy, or you think you
Yeah.
don't, or you're not aware of avenues that you might be able to make use of, um, to meditate on what's going on in your mind. But yeah, like Tammy said, it creates a profound imbalance of emotional labor,
I think we might have lost Dumi.
Yeah, I think we might have lost my man over there. But
Yeah.
like, if I could just pick up on a point he was making there, like if he comes back, like an earlier point he was making about like how liberating it is to have the vocab and the language to understand our own experiences.
Yeah.
Words like trauma, words like trigger,
Yeah.
words, words that I guess for us have become cliches, but truly, like, those words were the first to liberate us and
Yeah.
perhaps put us in a position where we better understood, where we're coming from with our own pain and our
Yeah.
own suffering, and therefore helped us to identify what exactly we need to work on.
Hey
That's
guys,
such an
sorry about that.
important thing. Yeah. We were just mising, just waiting for you, but
Yeah,
like, yeah.
sorry, I've got a weird internet connection. Um, but yeah, I was just saying that, like, when you're in a space where where you're not able to be grateful for the wonderful things in your life, when you're not able to be grateful for your relationship with your partner, your relationships with your friends, you're not going to do the work that's required to ensure the sanctity of those relationships, or to ensure their ongoing longevity, to ensure that those relationships are successful in the first place, right? And I think,
Yeah.
beyond an imbalance of emotional labor, it just creates an imbalance in every way you can imagine a relationship, right? And where you leave that unfettered, it means that you even make decisions that you can even make decisions that risk your relationship, that risk your relationship with your friends, with your family, with your intimate partner. And I think, you know, it's so important, like Wongani said, to intervene long before that, long before you feel that, right? Just because that if you leave the difficulties you experience to just grow unfettered, then it's going to mean that you lose your relationships, man. It's going to mean that
Absolutely.
you lose the people around you. It's going to mean that you lose your job because you're not doing the work that's required to keep your job. It's going to mean that everything around you literally crumbles and falls apart, right? Just because everything that's valuable requires ongoing maintenance. Everything that's valuable requires protection, right? And if you're not going to protect those things, then you can't have those things.
Yeah.
So that's probably how it's impacted my life. Just the inability to be grateful for the important things.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Dumi. Tami, I think yours is also quite an interesting case, and this is why I like the variety of guys who are on this call. I mean, you have a lot on the line, married man, you have a kid, and all of that stuff. So some of the burdens that come with mental health that we've already discussed in many ways for you are twofold, in a sense that you sometimes have to take care of yourself, but at the same time, you're in a partnership with someone where you're taking care of each other, taking care of your child and your household as well. So can you just take us through that double, I don't want to call it a double burden, but it's almost a double duty, of mental health, especially when you're building a family and a household, along with obviously your other experiences with mental health from your youth.
Yes, I'm gonna try because my internet connection is not too strong, so maybe I'll do like the first 2 or 3 minutes without video. Sure. Before I start on my story, I just want to say something in relation to what Dumi was saying about like leaving things unfettered and what that ends up in. Another thing you must remember that as men who grow up in a patriarchal society, we are more predisposed to violence than anyone else. And one and two, the emotion, we said this a couple of calls already, the only emotion that we seem to be allowed to express is that of anger because it's associated with power. And not dealing with these emotions, not dealing with these things will mean that these emotions will boil over through anger and violence. And it goes back to what Bongani was saying earlier around, or was it Dumi, around how many of the killings that happened around the last couple of weeks also resulted in the men hanging themselves, right? It also means that over and above, the patriarchal, misogynist society that makes it okay for us to inflict harm on women, it is also our internal undealt with demons that put us in a position where we're going to end up lashing out the way that we do. So that's also the true danger, where you will become the kind of perpetrator of violence that shows up on the newspaper. And that in itself should scare you. It should scare you to be an abusive partner. It should scare you to be a partner that could even be murderous in one way or another. Just to say that, like, I think from my side, just from my own experiences, Bongs, just to relay them in relation to fatherhood, in relation to my own life as well. I think as a boy, growing up, one of my biggest insecurities has always been insecurities that have everything to do with maleness and manness and virility and might and strength and violence, because I grew up in a society, I think we all grew up in this kind of society where you know, the archetype of a man is crafted so well for you from the time you're a child. From the movies that you watch to the action figures that you play with, and you call them action figures, right? And you want to make a distinguishment between them and dolls, to all the other things that we consume and we're socialized with. And I just, you know, I just couldn't resonate with the stoic, like machismo, strength-driven definition of masculinity. I could never resonate with it. I was a child that was predisposed to crying, and I've always been ashamed of that kind of thing. Always, since I was a kid. And I'd hide that, and I would, you know, for example, when I was a child, I'd say to myself, like, I haven't cried in a year now. Yeah, I'm proud of myself.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? On some like hide the fact that you are vulnerable.
And you sit there with that lump in your throat.
Sit there with that lump in your throat. You know what I'm saying? Like, conjure up, you know, machismo behavior. You know, conjure up bravado-ness. And that's why, back to that episode we did last week, that's why I think hip hop resonated with me so much, because it was an escape from my own sense of sensitivity and vulnerability.
Yeah,
it was an area in my life where I could be like, yeah, I'm the shit, nah, you know what I'm saying? And I could enjoy a sense of machismo through someone else. So I've always struggled with that.
That's strong.
I struggled with that getting into varsity. I struggled with that, like, with the friends I'd hang out with in varsity, like even in the dating days, you know, before I met you guys and whatever, you know, and like I would struggle with alpha maleness, you know, kind of wanting to be some kind of alpha male and all those kinds of things. So, and only very recently did I accept how I am, like the kind of person that I am, the complex, emotional, vulnerable empath that I am.
Yeah,
I've fought it for so long. Like, you know, Bongs and I have I have a running joke with Bongs and Lucy about my Aries sun and my Cancer moon. It's a running joke. You know, I always just tease myself because it comes from somewhere. I know the context.
Yeah.
I see the feedback. I think
There's a bit of feedback, yeah.
Actually, I don't know. Let me just
maybe volume.
Is there feedback now?
No, now you're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I've always had that experience, and now getting into fatherhood, because I thought I dealt with it at some point. You know, I thought like around maybe again the wave of consciousness 2016, 2015. I thought I had kind of dealt with that energy and that problem, and like I think through counseling with Lucy and stuff and the people around me, like, you know, I thought I dealt with it. I thought I had accumulated all the vocabulary. But it went down to this, and it goes back to the point that I made earlier. I realized when my child was born that all of the emotional labor or of taking charge of my emotions and my insecurities and my traumas was carried by Lucy, actually. And I realized when the child was born and Lucy's experiencing this thing called postpartum depression, where she can no longer carry my burden, where there's a child in the picture, and, you know, we have to concentrate on this child, and also I have to show up for Lucy in ways that I might have not showed up before, and in a way I'm not experienced in showing up for her, because we never had a child before. And so I then, you know, weeks after Maru's born, you know, and Maru maybe is about 6 or 7 weeks old now, I slip into my own depression. that is deeply informed by masculine failures and shame and guilt that I thought I was experiencing. I thought I failed as a dad one way or another. I failed to be with Busi. I thought, I'd be there but not be present. I'd be present but not quite there, and all of those kinds of things. And I slipped into that field of depression because it was the first time where I had to be self-sufficient in a vulnerable moment. Because I've always been self-sufficient, I think, we've been introduced to a precarious and a new level of existence by virtue of having a child. And so I've never experienced what I'm experiencing right now insofar as the mounting challenges that come with fatherhood and that come with parenthood and that come with raising a newborn child. The implication then is, I'm gonna switch off my video because I'm losing connection. The implication then, I again, was me being totally absent from the family environment. Again, I'm present, I'm physically there, I'm changing the nappy, I'm doing the domestic labor that is associated with being a parent, but I'm not doing the emotional labor that is associated with parenting and actually raising a child.
Wow.
And I'm not doing the emotional labor that's associated with being a husband. Right? But I'm there for the nappies, and I'm there for the fetch the thing and the fetch the that, and I'm there for the pick up the child, and I'm there for the make the child sleep, but I'm not there for and like literally probably it really nearly killed the relationship between Boo. It really nearly killed it because I was losing myself, and it inadvertently meant that the partner that met me was losing me as well. And there was a reckoning and all that kind of stuff, and it was severely painful when that stuff happened. But I think from there on, I had a conversation with Bongani. I think maybe Maru was around 3 months old.
Yeah, December.
Yeah, it was December. Maru was about 3 months old, and I'm telling him my pain and my what, and Bongs was like, yeah, because I was like, I'm gonna commit to doing this, I'm gonna commit to doing better and blah blah, I'm gonna be a better family man, etc., and all those kinds of things, which are noble in and of themselves. Bongs asked a simple question: what do you want for yourself, though? Like, what do you want for yourself? And I also had this conversation with Dumi a bit later. And it hit me very hard when he asked me that question. That like, I'd been so embroiled in my own insecurity and my own pain and my own guilt and my own shame that it snowballed into a total loss of self.
Yeah.
Where all I was the domestic figure in the household, and all I was a household, and all I was associated to a household. But again, I lost self, and I think that's a very, very important thing that we have to consider all the time. Is the reason why mental health and making sure your mental health is intact is so that you literally don't lose yourself, right? Because you lose yourself, you lose your appreciation for life and actually living and breathing, and you seep into areas of contemplating suicide, and really just contemplating the worst for yourself, because your love for self is gone completely, and you cannot show up in any way for your family. You cannot show up for your spouse, your kid, or anything like that. So I think men who are in a journey towards like starting a family, it's important for you to have a firm grasp of who you are and have a firm grasp of what demons you're fighting.
so that you can constantly work on yourself, so that you can be present for your family.
Mm.
So that you can be present for your family, right? Because again, I think I was also hiding behind this thing, but I'm here. I'm changing the nappy, and I'm making the food, and I'm running the errand, and I'm doing this. But that's very mechanical stuff. Anyone can do that dead inside.
Mm.
Wow.
Wow.
And that's what I had to like really reckon with. And now I'm definitely a much better dad. I'm a much better husband. And whenever these things, I slip back into those moments of anxiety, because it starts off with mild anxiety and it just reverses into this, backslides into this horrible pit. I just pull the handbrake on that real quick. And I solicit help, man. Like I've never really gone for like formal medical therapy, but like my pastor has been a really, really good source. So for gents who might not, have resources in that moment in time to seek medical help and quality medical help, I think sometimes like the people that there are institutions that exist in our communities that are objective, that and capable, that can assist us. For me, it was church. And my relationship with my pastor became far more intimate, as a result of that. But yeah, man, it's those fights, man. And I think so many of us resonate with each other's fights as well. That's why, my conversations with Dumi and Bongs in private off this call are so important to me, right? Because they can resonate here and there with what I'm going through, and they're throwing reflections back at me. But again, it's one thing to have that moment and not do anything about it. You must do something about it. You must do something about it. You must actually go back to the drawing board. Go back to the drawing board. And really be charged by your willingness to live in the first and foremost, because that's when you have a willingness to live in the first place, it's the greatest privilege. And then you move from that place to getting better. And the people around you ought to hold you accountable, as opposed to them being victims of the monster in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for that, Tommy. And as we said, like, because of the variety of life experiences that we all on this video call that all of us have, we hope that different types of men are able to take, I don't know, to take what's appropriate for them. And I think, Tommy, yours was particularly important for young men who are building families. And as you said, to know what they're walking into the relationship and into the institution with. So I'll just briefly cover my experiences with relationships, because mine is weird. I only started to, because I only acknowledged my own mental health issues relatively, I wouldn't say late. Some people only discover at like age 54, 48 that they have mental health issues. But as far as the circle of friends that I come from, I think I was a bit of a late bloomer to formally understand and diagnose what my issues were. So by the time I realized that I had struggled with anxiety, or that I was struggling with it at the time, I was able to then retrospectively look at my relationships with people in the past and start pointing out instances where what I thought was just a mood swing was actually anxiety. What I thought was just a breakdown in communication was anxiety. What I thought was the natural end of my relationship with a person was actually anxiety. And so when I was able to retrospectively look at that, I realized that throughout my life, and those of you who are close friends with me will know that I always had, a lot of people would always ascribe, certain personality and character traits to me. Someone who is decisive, someone who is principled, someone who is stable, quote unquote, but there were always instances where people who were close to me witnessed very dramatic mood swings in me. And sometimes they were quite unexplained. I'd literally stop talking to people who I was with, who theoretically I was supposed to be enjoying my time with at the time. I would literally just stop talking. When I say stop talking, I mean I would stop verbally saying words. And in my mind, I was in control. I was happy to be like that because I felt like I was in control and I felt like what I was doing was right for me. But for the other person witnessing that, it was incredibly inorganic and unnatural to see me express my mood swings like that, because I'd never lash out. I'd never throw things at people. I never shout at them. And for a very long time, I took pride in the fact that that was my personality trait, that like I don't lash out and lose my temper, but I'd always retreat into my own mind and into my own self. And like I said, at the time, I thought that was me taking control of my life and taking control of my dignity, right? But in actual fact, when I look, now that I finally understood how anxiety manifested itself in my life, I realized that that was anxiety, and in many instances, also linked to shame. It was linked to the fact that when I was confronted with an issue, I didn't know how to head on tackle it and say, here's where it's my fault, here's where it's your fault, here's how we both vulnerably deal with the issue. I'd always retreat in a bit to protect myself, and in a bit to stay in control. But that was anxiety taking over. That wasn't my dignity taking over. That wasn't my sense of self-love taking over. That wasn't me saying I'm too good to get into this fight or into this discussion taking over. That was purely out of a place of fear, a place of losing, losing an argument, which isn't supposed to be your main focus, but it came from a place of me fearing losing an argument, quote unquote, me fearing being exposed for how broken I was inside. So I'd rather keep quiet than expose myself for being wrong, for expose myself for being broken, for expose myself for being a myriad of issues. And so this manifested itself in romantic relationships where there are partners in my past who to this day probably don't understand why I experienced mood swings or why my mood swings manifested themselves the way that they did. And when I look back at it, and only after doing therapy did I realize that I was actually anxious. And because we associate anxiety with panic attacks, right? That's what everyone thinks anxiety is. No one associates it with a peaceful, stoic retreat into the self. But that's who I was. And as a result, a lot of people...
All things is a constant emotion,
Exactly. And so a lot of people who know me, I think, and including myself, made the mistake of thinking that because I was stoic and quiet and retreated to myself, it couldn't have been anxiety. But when I look back, that's 100% what it was. It was a fear of dealing with conflict in a healthy way. It was a fear of being wrong, and a fear of being exposed, for being a sham, for being a fraud, for not having my things together, for being a failure, for feeling duped, feeling lied to. All of those things manifested itself in relationships in the past. And when I say relationships, it's not just romantic relationships, but many friends who are no longer in my life are probably looking back and wondering, what did actually happen with Mongani? Why did he retreat and stop putting in the work? And it all has to do with the fact that it came from a broken place of fear and anxiety. And so I think my biggest regret, there are some people who I'm glad left my life in general, just unrelated to anxiety. There's some people where I look back and I think, I don't think they were supposed to leave my life at the moment that they left it at. I don't think so. Sometimes we like to over celebrate cutting people out of our lives, but we don't realize that the reason why some people left our lives is because of our own brokenness. And in many instances, it's because of our unwillingness to take responsibility for our mental health. And so I do look back at some of those broken friendships with very precious people in my life who shouldn't have actually left my life, but ended up leaving because I wasn't willing to do the work on my own mental health. I think with you two, I've never really experienced that to that extent, but there've been many instances where I've jeopardized my friendship with even you guys, just due to the fact that I wasn't communicating properly. And so Yeah, I think that's how it's affected my relationship with people. And for those of you who are watching, who only either diagnosed your mental health issue very later on in life or only found out later on that you're struggling with a particular thing, I'm really trying to speak to the people who only retrospectively started looking back at broken relationships and realized that they weren't supposed to break. And I'd really implore you guys to go and fix them if you can. You know, fix them if you can. Understand that it's your responsibility this time around to take on the work of fixing those relationships. But I'd highly, highly encourage you to reach out to those people and tell them what it is that you've realized, where you think you were wrong, and start fixing them. Because I promise you, there's some friendships that weren't supposed to end. And I don't think you should be celebrating the end of some of those friendships. If anything, you should be celebrating overcoming your mental health issues. So that's what I'd like you guys to take away from this. So to the viewers and listeners, give us 2 minutes as we enter the final segment of our discussion, part 3 of episode 5, where we're dealing with the men in mental health. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes time. Please stay online, and yeah, we'll see you just now.